What's up, everybody? If you want to join the greatest online Star Wars community, the Fandom Menace, make sure you hit that subscribe button before today's video starts, so you don't miss out on any updates and you're always the first to know when our newest videos go live.
Did you ever hear of the story of Darth Kennedy the Clueless? I thought not. It's not a story Disney would tell you.
We criticize Kathleen Kennedy a lot, and rightly so. That chick is the worst. This is a visual representation of Star Wars under her watch. So you can see why we feel the way we do. Over the course of her 7 years as president, we've watched Star Wars go from this to this. Okay, I promise that's enough. Now, in all seriousness, Kathleen Kennedy is the wrong person for the job. She's the one who tried to gear Star Wars to a new, resistant audience. She's the one who allowed creatives to attack the fans. And she's the one who let Rian Johnson loose and ruin Star Wars with The Last Jedi. We're not here to talk about her just out of the blue. Whenever her name comes up in conversation, I usually vomit. So I try to limit that for the sake of my teeth's enamel. But there is a new article from Rolling Stone that really sheds light on why The Last Jedi sucks, and a whole lot more. I'm going to be cutting in during the article quite a bit because I can't contain my
Rage much longer.
Okay, that was a little dramatic. But before we get started, this article, along with another from Entertainment Weekly, gives us a little insight on how the press junket for the film has gone down. According to both articles, all of this information is from October. But as we know, all sorts of things have popped up in regards to Episode 9, like the reshoots, the test screenings, and a whole lot more. So remember that as we move forward and ask yourself this question. Just how much are they scrambling behind the scenes? The tension seems high. I hope it'll last. Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy may well be the most powerful woman in Hollywood, and she's hardly a newcomer to the world of blockbusters, serving as Steven Spielberg's producer since 1982's E.T. That partnership extended to Spielberg's collaborations on the Indiana Jones films with George Lucas, who anointed Kathleen Kennedy his successor in 2012 as he negotiated a sale to Disney. As guardian of the Star Wars universe, Kennedy has needed every ounce of her experience, never hesitating to swap out creative teams, even mid-movie when necessary, as on 2018's commercial disappointment Solo, A Star Wars Story. In October, 2 weeks before Game of Thrones' David Benioff and D.B. Weiss pulled out of a year-old deal to develop a new Star Wars trilogy, Kennedy called Rolling Stone to discuss December 20th The Rise of Skywalker, and post-Skywalker saga cinematic future for the franchise that remains wide open, even as Last Jedi director Rian Johnson and Marvel's Kevin Feige develop potential films. Jurassic World director Colin Trevorrow was slated to write and direct Episode 9 before you brought back JJ. Is this final entry in the trilogy a particularly hard nut to crack? Every one of these movies is a particularly hard nut to crack. There's no source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-page novels. We don't have anything other than passionate storytellers who get together and talk about what the next iteration might be. We go through a really normal development process that everybody else does. You start by talking to filmmakers who you think exhibit the sensibilities you're looking for, and I would argue that the list is very small. The people who really have the sensibilities about these kind of movies, and then the experience and the ability to handle how enormous jobs these movies are. So we try to be as thoughtful as we possibly can about making those choices. I also would argue sometimes the people that get involved with the normal development process and then they realize, oh my god, this is so much more than I ever imagined. So it's pretty common that when you're working on these movies, you're not making choices and decisions that necessarily work out exactly the way you want them to from the get-go. It's been an evolving process with lots of people and lots of opinions. So I feel really fortunate that I've worked with so many great people that have been absolutely committed, JJ being one of them. He's a huge fan, incredibly passionate about Star Wars, and has been from the moment I sat down with him and started talking to him about this. And the more he got involved, the more excited he became. So I think if you asked him today, he probably wished he would have been in a situation where he could have done all three. But as I said, these are huge projects, so it's very difficult unless there's 3 or 4 years between. It's not really physically possible. Well, duh, Kathleen! You shouldn't have been rushing these things out left and right in the first place. You're not Marvel. And even when the MCU was new, they weren't pumping these out with the same frequency. Yes, the Hulk and Iron Man did share the same summer, but there was nothing in 2009 from Marvel. There's been a Star Wars movie every year from 2015 until now. The first mistake they made, Disney, Lucasfilm, pronouns pal, was that they tripped over themselves right out of the gate. They saw dollar bills, not stories. They didn't put in the time, and just like DC, they didn't get the same results as Marvel. I myself am not a J.J. Abrams fan, but uniformity would be the one thing that saves this trilogy. That's one of the many reasons why his Star Trek trilogy is shit. Beyond is not a good movie, and, well, he didn't even direct that one. As of now, and moving forward, we're stuck with a jumbled mess that has a Star Wars sticker slapped onto it. This trilogy is broken. All the Kingsman horses can't put Humpty's mess back together again. It's just like the Joker said. What happens when you take the most beloved franchise of all time, disrespect the legacy, and rush it out too quickly? You get what you fucking deserve. Moving back to the article, however, what strikes you about how he and his co-screenwriter Chris Terrio did manage to crack the nut on this one? Chris is a very, very thoughtful, intelligent guy, and that JJ chose and we all got to know. And again, it went through so much of what we often go through, which is endless discussion, lots of artwork. Luckily, JJ had already been into a pretty deep dive before he was doing The Force Awakens, and during the process of that movie, it's almost like an education of getting acquainted with all the aspects of Star Wars. Not just looking at the movies, but taking the number of people who are still around that worked for George Lucas for years, understanding the mythology of what he created. One of the things we talk about all the time is the fact that it's very important to George that these stories really mean something, that they have something to say, and that they have a real emotional core. Where was that in The Last Jedi? So we spend a lot of time talking about that and trying to find the spine of the story that feels satisfying. When you're dealing, as I said, with something that you don't necessarily have any source material for, then you're looking for a filmmaker who has a strong point of view, who can find themselves in the characters and in the story. That's what drives the momentum of storytelling, and I think JJ is the perfect example of that. He can't do anything without his energy and enthusiasm becoming very much a part of the storytelling, so he's very fun to be in a room with when you're trying to break the story, because he doesn't have that amazing energy and enthusiasm, and he's funny. That always helps. We spend a lot of time laughing. So Chris Terrio also wrote Batman vs. Superman and Justice League, so why am I supposed to be excited? Also in regards to J.J. Abrams, I'm sure he spent a lot of time laughing. Maybe you should spend some time working out the logistics of your story. I know these articles are great PR, but I don't give a damn if you enjoyed making the movie. It's all about the end product. George Lucas almost had a heart attack making A New Hope, and that's one of the greatest films of all time. But we had so much fun, who cares? You've made constant dog shit for 2 movies out of 3. It's like Jenko from 21 Jump Street. I'm glad you had a great time in high school, but you've learned nothing. How did you get to the point where you felt we've got this with the story of Episode 9? Well, I wouldn't say you ever get to a point where you just go, that's it. It's a constantly evolving process. No, Kathleen, that's bullshit. I mean, there's little things we're still trying to get exactly right now. You never stop the storytelling iterations that go on in making movies. But we know what these previous 8 movies are. We know what the story is. So in this movie, we're taking all of what comes before, and we're trying to find a satisfying conclusion. And that's something we can only depend on our instincts to arrive at, whether or not we have. And then we have what I would call the family and friends that you pull in and show the things when you're trying to get some kind of feedback and make sure that you're making sense and that you're delivering on the things that you intend. That's something that we're still talking about right now. Oh, it's a little late if you ask me, Kathleen. Makes these reshoot rumors seem kinda credible. But my big question is, do you though? You've shown time and time again how the people you've appointed to write Star Wars have no clue what's going on and you're completely okay with them antagonizing fans. This little group of family and friends seems to be a code for a group of sycophants or yes men. Yes people. Now this is where it's going to get real good. Rian Johnson made some controversial choices for Episode 8, The Last Jedi, especially considering its dramatic purpose as the second movie in the trilogy. Were you, to an extent, deliberately setting out to challenge fans and their expectations? We definitely did. We're talking all the time about how we move Star Wars forward and keep it relevant. Obviously, we don't want to just make the same movie over and over again. Let me stop you right there. You've made the same movie over and over again. You did it because you wanted that quick buck, all while telling us that these were wholly original stories. Now, at the end, when you need the fans the most, after they've called you out on your bullshit multiple times over the course of multiple years, you try and weasel your way out of it. No, not this time. I mean, how the hell can you be so dense? The original... Back to the article. So I agree with you. I mean, I love what Rian did. It's an absolutely wonderful movie. I think he's an extraordinary filmmaker. Bullshit. And I really appreciate the bold moves that he did make. I think people forget that, especially when you're doing a trilogy structure. The first movie is setting up, the second usually is the conflict, and the third is the resolution. So you're bound to have that second movie, much the way The Empire Strikes was probably the darkest and most dramatic of the 3. We talked about it with Indiana Jones. You know, we did Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then we did Temple of Doom, which was dark and created a lot of controversy, and people were surprised at where it went with the storytelling. But frankly, that was the whole point. Oh my god! How the hell can you be so dense? The original trilogy and Indiana Jones aren't even comparable. Yes, The Last Jedi is the middle chapter, but in the case of The Empire Strikes Back, it was the continuation of the story. Luke only made it so far in A New Hope. We actually see him progress in The Empire Strikes Back. In The Force Awakens, Rey achieved everything. She knew everything there was to know. She does not learn or grow in The Last Jedi one bit. Only now, in the third act, the closing, the finale, is she beginning to train. How do we know this? Because the merchandise told us. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is a terrible comparison. It's its own contained story. Just because there's a dark tone and The Last Jedi is a dark mark on the legacy of Star Wars, it doesn't make them comparable. I love that we have these amazing, passionate fans who care so much. And I know sometimes they may think we don't listen, but we do. And I thought it was fantastic that people got engaged. It just shows me and everyone else how much they care. And that's important to all of us, that we're doing this. We really look at them as the custodians of the story as much as we are. We look at it as kind of a partnership. I thought we were a small vocal minority. I guess that's not the case anymore. Or we never were. I mean, if we're so insignificant, why are we being brought up in Rolling Stone magazine? Think about that. So you truly haven't decided what's next? No, we've got various things we're looking at and various ways in which we can begin or not. As you can imagine, do you go back? Do you go forward? All those questions are being asked. Do we stay in this galaxy? Do we go to another? The universe is never ending. The good news and the bad news. They all have endless possibilities. It's liberating, it's exciting, and it creates a lot of pressure and anxiety as well. Here's a suggestion. Why don't you take a break? How does Kevin Feige come into the mix? Kevin has been a huge fan of Star Wars, and he's made that pretty clear. And I think then he went off to do a couple of the Spider-Man movies. He realized that he could kind of step in and out of what he's doing, especially with just Marvel. He talked to us, and then he talked to the studio and said, is there any chance I could step in and do one of the Star Wars movies? And I thought that was a pretty cool idea. So we're just beginning to talk about what that might be and when that might be. But that's a ways off. So what you're saying is you need a big name that has goodwill with the fans? I see how you operate here, Kathleen Kennedy. Smart. Have you thought about how much longer you'd like to keep doing what you're doing? I'm retiring tomorrow. I'm sorry for what I've done. I deserve to be shot. Sorry. Wishful thinking. I've really enjoyed this, I have to say. It's been incredibly exciting. And just the fact that George asked me to do this, I felt a tremendous responsibility with stepping in and taking care of the franchise, which you fucking failed at. And if there were going to be new movies, to really put a team around this that cared as much as he did. What happens in the future? And how long and for how much longer do I do this? I don't know yet. I'm looking at all that. It's been incredibly satisfying where we've reached this point where we've completed the saga. And I think made a really wonderful movie. It's going to feel very satisfying to the audience. So that's what I'm focused on right at the moment. And what the future holds, who knows? Hopefully the future holds you riding off into the sunset with Frank Marshall, happy, healthy, and away from Star Wars. The rest of this article is unimportant, but Kathleen Kennedy does leave the possibility of George Lucas coming back, though doubtful. I love articles like this because it shows just how out of touch Kathleen Kennedy is, while showing us here in the Fandom Menace that we were important enough to make a change. Does this change any of my thoughts about the rise of Skywalker? Hell no. If anything, I feel like Kathleen Kennedy's trying to tell us to lower our expectations. Believe me, KK, if my expectations were any lower, I'd strike oil. Next time, we'll be back to cover JJ's interview with Entertainment Weekly and why Star Wars Episode 9 interest is at an all-time low. Where are we getting this information from? Are we making it up? Of course not. This comes from the official Star Wars Facebook page. But anyway, folks, thank you for watching. We appreciate each and every one of you here. If you could hit that thumbs up button and make sure you're subscribed with your bell notification turned on to all, that'd be great so you can get our next series of videos. We got tons of stuff coming up in the next couple of days. So I want to know what your thoughts are on Kathleen Kennedy as a producer, her work on Star Wars, and this interview as a whole. Does it seem like more corporate PR bullshit? It does to me, and it stinks. I don't like it. But most importantly, I just want to know what you guys think about it. So that's all I got to say about that. Well, no, that's not true. I have one more thing to say. You know what it is. Go out into the world and be excellent to each other.